All right. Well, let's start the show and talk about what's going on in Ukraine. So we've got some pretty big developments, some startling developments over the past 24 hours out of Ukraine. A couple of big pieces are coming together, and we want to talk about them. According to Ukrainian intelligence, NATO is sending long-range weapons to Ukraine, and those systems will be used to attack the Crimea in the south. Okay. Now, if you read, you can be torn on two sides of this issue, right? Because if you listen to Ukraine, then they believe that Crimea, of course, is Ukrainian territory. If you listen to Russia, that it's annexed and it's now Russian territory. Well, forget all of that. The U.S. State Department just issuing a release in their embassy saying, get Americans out of Ukraine, and there's a missile threat awareness. We get out immediately, depart immediately from this area. Because major concerns about what's about to happen in Ukraine. So we've been in a war for 130 days, but no, now is the time to leave.
Right, which is interesting, right? So if you follow sort of the cycle of things that the United States evacuated the embassy employees only inside of Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict in February, March time, and then sent them back, when would you say? Late May, early June, right? And so now they understand something that they are trying to signal, not that any American civilians should have stayed up to this point, right? But you don't know what somebody's, life choices are. But now they are absolutely saying Americans in this region flee. So why?
Yeah, get out, get out. Well, why? So Michael Tracy has maybe some hints about what is about to unfold in Crimea and why we should be concerned about this leading to World War III. There's a couple of big pieces on this. So Michael Tracy said this on Crimea. Ukraine military intelligence says their new U.S. missile systems will be used to strike Crimea. Was this part of the deal, he asks? This comes from a press conference. Here's the Ukrainian press conference that happened just a short time ago. Let's put this up on the screen. It says the chief, Katerina Tishenko, the chief intelligence directorate, states that the Russian military facilities in the occupied Crimea are among the targets to be hit by the Ukrainian troops. Okay. Details. A journalist asked the representative of the chief intelligence directorate whether Ukraine would use the HIMARS and M270 systems on the territory of Crimea. Quote, today, the Crimean Peninsula has become simply a hub for the transfer of all equipment and weapons that come from Russia Federation to the southern regions of the country. Secondly, you see how actively the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation is currently used for launching missile strikes on our territory. These are the Caliber systems, frigates, small missile ships, submarines, which are constantly on combat duty, waiting for commands, and then they conduct launches regardless of the time of day. Because of this, it is also one of the targets that should be hit in order to guarantee the safety of the citizenship and the faculties of Ukraine and in general. Okay, so there you go. So,
well, of course, Ukraine still considers Crimea a Russian-occupied territory, meaning we still consider it ours, but we just currently don't have control over it, right?
Right.
We know that over a year ago, Zelensky ordered an attack on Crimea using drones in March of 2021.
And this was arguably the impetus for the actual invasion of Ukraine in the eastern region because of the amassing of troops moving towards Crimea in March of this year, in February.
So what's interesting about this is if you look at this New York Times article dated just a few weeks ago, that civilians are urged to flee Russian-occupied areas in the south. Well, where are they going to go, right? Clearly not north to Russia. Most of the escape routes are not clear for them to use. And so Ukraine is telling them, move into Crimea, and then from there, try to go to another country where there is a Ukrainian embassy. But they're not at all clear how to get to Crimea or out of Crimea. So they're just saying, don't be here. We're going to fire on Crimea, get there, but then get out of there. I don't think those are very strong marching orders. I wouldn't feel very good about them if they applied to me.
No, but so that's the conundrum on the Ukrainian side and the U.S. side. Like, get out of there because crap is about to hit the fan. If you read Ukrainian Twitter, Telegram, journalists, etc., who are Ukrainian, they're saying this is when it all turns around for Ukraine. This afternoon, one Ukrainian journalist saying, because of the Neptune missiles, because of these missiles that are they're about to destroy and neutralize the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. They're about to neutralize them. This is going to open up and completely turn around this war. This is what's about to happen. Okay, that's what you think. It'll be interesting to see if that's actually going to happen. You're going to neutralize the Russian Navy. Okay, every offensive, by the way, there hasn't really been any kind of offensive at all from Ukraine. As we had Larry Johnson on the show, there hasn't been any offensive. We keep hearing about these offensive, there hasn't been any offensive. If anything, it's been defensive and it's been crushed. So now we're going to have an offensive against the Navy, maybe using NATO weapons. Maybe that's why the State Department is asking for people to get out of there, because they know what's coming. We know that there's going to be some larger attack. Okay, here is now what Russian officials are saying. Why we're talking about this is World War III. Russian official threatens doomsday if Ukraine attacks Crimea. So this is the former president, Dmitry Medvedev, said that Ukraine would be faced with a doomsday if the country launches an attack on Crimea. And you can take the laptop here, Philip, if you want. In a warning on Sunday, Medvedev was quoted by the state-run TASS news agency as saying that some ecstatic, bloody clowns who pop up there with some statements now and then are trying to threaten us. I mean, attacks on Crimea and so on. Should anything of this kind happen, they will be faced with a doomsday. Very quick and tough immediately. There will be no avoiding it, but they keep on provoking the general situation by such statements. And yes, he's absolutely right about that. I mean, didn't we heard just a few weeks ago, President Zelensky saying, hey, yes, it's tough, but we are going to push back in Crimea. Like, we are not going to give up this area. We are going to mount an offensive in the south. So the New York Times is reporting this. The State Department is asking embassy employees to get out and all Americans to leave right now. Russia is saying, you keep saying this is going to be a doomsday scenario. What more evidence do you need at this point?
I mean, we were reporting in end of May, early June, that any peace talks that were beginning, right, just kind of dipping the toe in, had Crimea off the table. Period. And we started to hear rumblings, sort of press rumors, that Zelensky's government was starting to warm to the idea. Mm-hmm. So what has happened between now and then? Well, money, weaponry, right? Continuance of global support. But at the same time,
grain as well. Grain through this region too.
Yes.
Right.
But at the same time, this is something that, both sides, if you read, media on either sides, they all agree that this will be bloody. This will continue to rage destruction throughout Ukrainian towns. And even the New York Times admits that, Ukraine is wondering, well, we think we'll get this territory back. So how much do we want to destroy these cities that we will have to build back up? Which may be a bit of a fantasy to think that they will ever get them back in order to rebuild them, right? It doesn't feel like anything has been retaken in that magnitude. And
nobody is highlighting what the people in those regions are actually wanting. They don't want to be part of Ukraine. They don't want to be part of what has already happened to them, and nobody's taking anything into consideration as to what they want. Russia is actually giving them what they want, which was liberation from, getting attacked all the time.
Well, now we see Russia offering fast-track passports to anyone who actually does want to become Russian citizens who lives in that region. And I think that this shows just how divided that nation is, because some people do want Ukraine to stay an independent sovereign nation who live there, and many people do not, right? Some people have sort of rolled the dice and said, well, we'll see if it's better under the Russian government.
So here's what Zelensky said, according to Ukrainian media. It says, today, another not-so-sober statement was made from Russia about the alleged doomsday for Ukraine. Of course, no one will accept such intimidation, Zelensky says. But look how cynical it is to say the same thing today, on the next anniversary of Russia's destruction of the Malaysian Boeing in the sky over Ukraine Donbass. Over the past weekend, as this Epoch Times piece points out, the Department of Defense proclaimed that the high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, are effective in Ukraine. Well, it's quite different, though, because actually what Russia is saying is that we've actually taken those out, and if you continue to bring these in here, we are going to continue to target them. In fact, Ukrainian news reports tried to pass this off. War on Fakes did a great takedown of this on Telegram, which was they tried to pass it off as a truck. This wasn't a HIMARS that Russia hit. It was simply a truck. And then that was debunked. No, it was a HIMARS system that Russia saw. It was brought in from the West, placed there to the tune. I mean, I don't know exactly the price tag on these things for one of these rocket systems.
I'm gonna just assure you that it's not cheap.
Yeah, absolutely not cheap. And by the way, we can't track it, right? There's still no any RFID tags on it. They didn't buy an Apple AirTag to put on these things, so they can't track them. But it's cost millions of dollars. Destroyed the moment it lands there, right? Great, good tax dollars well spent. On top of that, you have Russians saying we also struck an arms meeting. So there was an arms meeting, Western arms meeting in Ukraine. They got together, Air Force leaders and others got together, and they were in a building having a discussion. Now, Ukraine says, oh, this was an attack on civilians. Russia says, no, these were arms leaders getting together and having a meeting about additional arms to be brought in, and we bombed them. And we took out this building where this arms meeting was happening.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be interesting to hear? We're going to hear more about this in the coming days. But here's Michael Tracy's second tweet on this piece. He says, back in the ecstatic days of February, March, none of the pro-war people were saying, oh, yeah, of course the U.S. will be providing long-range missile systems to attack Crimea by July. Meanwhile, they made sure to denounce anyone who mentioned mission creep and incremental escalation. President Biden, of course.
Yes.
Remember this? He told us, right? Like when you get into this situation where we're sending boots on the ground, we're going to be sending these like different missile systems. We're going to be getting together and doing all this. Like that, my friends, is World War III, right? He said that.
Oh, yes. He assured us he knows where the line is.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's your point? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. You know, we've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.